The Haunting of Blackwood Manor. Chapter 1. The Inheritance. Claire stood at the edge of the long, winding driveway, staring up at the imposing silhouette of Blackwood Manor. The sky was a blanket of dark clouds, casting an ominous shadow over the ancient stone walls. The trees surrounding the property seemed to whisper secrets as the wind rustled through their leaves. The manor was hers now, an unexpected inheritance from a distant relative she had never met. Claire had spent her life in the city, surrounded by the constant hum of activity. The quiet of the countryside was both unnerving and intriguing. As she approached the heavy wooden doors, she felt a chill run down her spine. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. She fumbled with the old-fashioned key, finally managing to turn the lock and push the door open with a creak that echoed through the empty halls. Inside, the manor was a relic of a bygone era. Dusty chandeliers hung from high ceilings, and faded portraits of stern-looking ancestors lined the walls. The air was musty, as if it had been sealed away for years. Claire couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She wandered through the rooms, each more lavish and eerie than the last. The library, with its floor-to-ceiling shelves of leather-bound books, and the grand ballroom, with its cracked mirrors and cobweb-draped chandeliers, hinted at the manor's former glory. But there was something else, something darker that seemed to linger in the shadows. As night fell, Claire made her way to the bedroom that had been prepared for her. The four-poster bed was draped in heavy velvet curtains, and the fireplace crackled with a welcoming warmth. She tried to ignore the unsettling feeling that had settled in the pit of her stomach. Lying in bed, she listened to the sounds of the manor, the creaking of the floorboards, the distant hoot of an owl, and the soft, almost imperceptible whispering that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Exhausted from the journey and the overwhelming strangeness of her new home, she finally drifted off to sleep. Chapter 2. The First Night. Claire awoke with a start. The room was pitch black, save for the faint glow of the dying embers in the fireplace. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to remember what had woken her. Then she heard it again, a soft, rhythmic tapping like the sound of fingernails on wood. She sat up in bed, straining to listen. The tapping continued, growing louder and more insistent. It seemed to be coming from just outside her bedroom door. Summoning her courage, Claire slipped out of bed and tiptoed across the cold floorboards. Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob. She took a deep breath and flung the door open. But the hallway beyond was empty. The tapping had stopped. She stood there for a moment, her heart racing, before closing the door and returning to bed. The rest of the night passed fitfully, with Claire drifting in and out of restless sleep. She dreamed of shadowy figures lurking in the corners of her room, their eyes gleaming with malevolent intent. Each time she woke, the room was silent and still, but the feeling of unease never left her. Chapter 3. The Stranger. The next morning, Claire awoke to a knock on the front door. She quickly dressed and hurried downstairs, relieved to see a friendly face. The man introduced himself as Tom, the caretaker of Blackwood Manor. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a weathered face that spoke of years spent working outdoors. "Welcome to Blackwood Manor, Miss Claire," he said with a warm smile. "I hope you found everything to your liking." Claire forced a smile. "Thank you, Tom. The manor is impressive, to say the least." Tom chuckled. "It certainly has a lot of history. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. I'm just a phone call away." As the day wore on, Claire busied herself with exploring the manor and its grounds. She discovered a beautiful, if overgrown, garden hidden behind a tall hedge. A small pond, covered in lily pads, sat in the center, its surface reflecting the gray sky. She also found a small chapel at the edge of the property, its stained glass windows cracked and faded. Inside, the air was cool and damp, and the stone floor was covered in a thick layer of dust. She couldn't help but feel a sense of reverence as she stood in the silent space. Despite the beauty of her surroundings, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The manor seemed to pulse with a dark energy, and she found herself constantly looking over her shoulder. That evening, as she sat in the library with a cup of tea, she heard the tapping again. It was faint at first, but it quickly grew louder, echoing through the empty halls. She tried to ignore it, telling herself it was just the house settling, but the sound was too persistent to dismiss. Summoning her courage, she followed the sound to a small, forgotten room at the back of the manor. The door was slightly ajar, and as she pushed it open, the tapping stopped. The room was empty, save for an old rocking chair that swayed gently back and forth. Claire's heart raced as she approached the chair. She reached out to touch it, but as soon as her fingers brushed the worn wood, the chair stopped moving. She took a step back, her mind racing with questions. Was it just her imagination, or was there something more sinister at play? Chapter 4. The Portrait. Over the next few days, Claire continued to hear the strange noises at night, the tapping, the whispering, and the occasional creak of floorboards. She tried to convince herself it was just the house settling, but the feeling of being watched never left her. One afternoon, while exploring the attic, she came across an old, dust-covered portrait. It was a painting of a young woman, her expression both beautiful and haunting. The nameplate at the bottom read, Amelia Blackwood, 1865. Claire felt a chill run down her spine as she stared into the woman's eyes. There was something unsettling about the portrait, something that made her feel as if Amelia were looking straight into her soul. She carefully removed the painting from the wall and carried it downstairs, determined to learn more about the mysterious woman. In the library, she found an old journal hidden behind a row of books. The leather cover was cracked and worn, and the pages were yellowed with age. As she flipped through the journal, she realized it belonged to Amelia Blackwood. The entries were filled with descriptions of life at the manor, but as Claire read on, the tone grew darker. Amelia wrote of strange occurrences, of feeling watched and hearing voices in the night. She described vivid nightmares and a growing sense of dread. One entry, dated just a few weeks before her death, caught Claire's attention. I fear the darkness that dwells within these walls. The shadows whisper my name, and I feel their cold breath upon my neck. I am not alone in this house. There is something here, something malevolent that seeks to consume me. I pray for deliverance, but I fear it is already too late. Claire's hands trembled as she closed the journal. The realization that Amelia had experienced the same things she was now facing filled her with a sense of urgency. She needed to uncover the truth about Blackwood Manor and the dark force that seemed to haunt it. Chapter 5. The Seance. Determined to get answers, Claire decided to hold a seance. She contacted a local medium, a woman named Margaret, who had a reputation for communicating with spirits. Margaret arrived at the manor that evening, bringing with her an assortment of candles, crystals, and other mystical tools. They set up in the grand dining room, the flickering candlelight casting eerie shadows on the walls. Margaret instructed Claire to hold her hands and close her eyes. Together, they began to chant, calling out to the spirits of Blackwood Manor. At first, there was nothing but silence. Then, slowly, the temperature in the room began to drop. Claire shivered as a cold breeze seemed to swirl around them. The candles flickered, and the air grew heavy with a palpable sense of tension. Margaret's voice grew stronger, more insistent. Spirits of Blackwood Manor, we seek your presence. Reveal yourselves to us. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the room, followed by the sound of footsteps. Claire's eyes snapped open, and she saw a shadowy figure standing in the doorway. The figure seemed to shimmer and fade as if it were made of smoke. Margaret tightened her grip on Claire's hands. Who are you? What do you want? The figure took a step forward, and Claire felt a wave of fear wash over her. The figure's eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and its mouth twisted into a cruel smile. I am the darkness that dwells within these walls, it hissed. I have claimed many souls, and I will not be denied. Claire's heart pounded in her chest as the figure lunged toward them. She felt a searing pain in her head, as if her mind were being torn apart. She screamed, and the world went black. Chapter 6. The Aftermath. Claire awoke to find herself lying on the cold, hard floor of the dining room. The candles had burned down to stubs, and the room was filled with an eerie silence. Margaret was kneeling beside her, a look of concern on her face. Are you all right? Margaret asked, helping Claire to her feet. Claire nodded, though she felt anything but all right. Her head throbbed, and she felt a lingering sense of dread. What happened? Who was that? Margaret's expression was grim. That was a powerful spirit, one filled with anger and malice. It has been trapped in this manor for a long time, feeding off the fear and suffering of those who live here. Claire's mind raced as she tried to process what she had seen. Is there any way to get rid of it? Margaret sighed. It's not going to be easy. Spirits like that are deeply rooted in the place they haunt. It will take a great deal of strength and determination to banish it. Despite her fear, Claire felt a surge of resolve. She couldn't let the darkness consume her like it had Amelia. She needed to find a way to break the spirit's hold on Blackwood Manor. Margaret promised to return in a few days with more tools to help in their fight against the spirit. In the meantime, Claire decided to continue her research, hoping to uncover more about the manor's dark history and the malevolent force that haunted it. Chapter 7. The Discovery. Claire spent the next few days delving into the history of Blackwood Manor. She pored over old documents, letters, and newspapers, trying to piece together the story of the house and its former inhabitants. She discovered that the manor had been built in the early 1800s by Jonathan Blackwood, a wealthy landowner with a reputation for cruelty. He had been known for his harsh treatment of his servants and tenants, and there were rumors of dark rituals and forbidden practices taking place within the manor's walls. Claire also learned about a series of mysterious deaths that had plagued the Blackwood family over the years. Many of the deaths were unexplained, and there were whispers of a curse that had been placed upon the family. One name kept appearing in her research: Samuel Blackwood, Jonathan's son. Samuel had been a reclusive and troubled man, obsessed with the occult and the supernatural. It was said that he had delved into dark magic, seeking to harness its power for his own purposes. Claire found an old photograph of Samuel in the library, and she couldn't help but notice the resemblance between him and the shadowy figure she had seen during the séance. She began to suspect that Samuel's spirit was the malevolent force that haunted the manor. Determined to learn more, Claire decided to explore the basement, a place that had been mentioned frequently in Samuel's journal. She had avoided it until now, but she knew that if she wanted to uncover the truth, she had to face her fears. Chapter 8. The Basement. The basement was dark and damp, with a musty smell that made Claire's nose wrinkle. She descended the narrow staircase, her flashlight casting eerie shadows on the stone walls. The air grew colder as she went deeper, and she could hear the distant drip of water echoing through the corridors. She reached the bottom of the stairs and found herself in a large, cavernous room. Old crates and barrels were stacked against the walls, and a thick layer of dust covered everything. In the center of the room was a large wooden door, reinforced with iron bands. Claire's heart raced as she approached the door. It was slightly ajar, and she could feel a cold draft emanating from the gap. She pushed the door open and stepped inside, her flashlight revealing a small chamber filled with strange symbols and markings. In the center of the chamber was a large stone altar, stained with dark, dried blood. Claire's stomach turned as she realized what had taken place here. This was where Samuel had performed his dark rituals, where he had tried to harness the power of the supernatural. As she examined the altar, she noticed a small, leather-bound book lying on the floor. She picked it up and began to read, her eyes widening as she realized it was Samuel's grimoire, a record of his experiments and rituals. The book was filled with detailed descriptions of summoning spells, binding rituals, and dark incantations. It became clear that Samuel had been trying to summon a powerful spirit, one that he believed could grant him immortality. But something had gone wrong. The spirit he had summoned was not one of benevolence, but of malevolence. It had consumed Samuel, trapping his soul within the manor and feeding off the fear and suffering of those who lived there. Claire's hands trembled as she closed the book. She knew now that she was dealing with something far more dangerous than she had imagined. But she also knew that she couldn't give up. She had to find a way to banish the spirit and free Blackwood Manor from its dark grip. Chapter 9. The Plan. Claire and Margaret stood in the dimly lit library, the pages of Samuel Blackwood's grimoire spread out before them. They had spent hours poring over the ancient text, deciphering its cryptic instructions and planning the ritual that might finally rid the manor of its dark presence. The air was thick with tension, and every shadow seemed to pulse with the lingering menace of the spirit. Margaret's face was etched with concern as she outlined the ritual's requirements. "We need to be precise, Claire," she said, her voice steady, despite the unease in her eyes. "Every element of the ritual has to be perfect. One mistake could make things worse." Claire nodded, her resolve unshaken. "What exactly do we need?" Margaret listed the items with a practiced ease. Rare herbs like sage and lavender for purification, ceremonial candles to light the way, a ceremonial dagger for the ritual's focal point, and a rare crystal known for its powerful cleansing properties. They would also need to create protective symbols around the manor and the altar. The task of gathering these items was daunting. Claire and Margaret embarked on a meticulous quest, visiting antique shops, botanical gardens, and occultists. Each item they procured felt like a small victory against the encroaching darkness. They knew the spirit would not relinquish its hold easily, but they were determined to see it through. As they prepared for the ritual, the disturbances in the manor intensified. Cold drafts swept through the rooms, shadows danced more aggressively, and the oppressive feeling of being watched never left them. The manor seemed to react to their preparations with a growing sense of hostility, but Claire's determination only strengthened. She was ready to face whatever awaited them in the dark. Chapter 10. Gathering Supplies. The process of gathering the necessary supplies for the ritual proved to be an arduous journey. Claire and Margaret spent several days scouring local shops and traveling to nearby towns. Each trip seemed to take them further into a web of supernatural intrigue, as if their quest was leading them deeper into the heart of the mystery. Claire's first stop was a quaint herbalist shop known for its rare and potent ingredients. The shopkeeper, an elderly woman with a knowing gaze, provided the sage and lavender, along with a cryptic warning. "These herbs have been used in many rituals," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Handle them with respect, for they carry the weight of countless souls." Next, Claire and Margaret visited an antique store to find the ceremonial dagger. The shop was filled with dusty relics and arcane items. The store owner, a reclusive man with a penchant for the occult, handed over a beautifully engraved dagger with an unsettling smile. "This blade has witnessed many dark rituals," he said. "It will serve you well in your endeavors." The final piece of their quest took them to a remote town where they sought a rare crystal known for its purifying properties. The journey was fraught with obstacles, from treacherous weather to unfamiliar terrain, but their determination drove them forward, and they eventually secured the crystal, feeling its weight as both a burden and a blessing. With their supplies gathered, Claire and Margaret returned to the manor, their spirits buoyed by their successes. They began preparing the basement chamber for the ritual, drawing protective symbols and setting up the altar. The manor seemed to watch their every move, its silence a heavy prelude to the confrontation that lay ahead. Chapter 11. The Ritual Begins. The night of the ritual was filled with a sense of foreboding. Claire and Margaret descended into the basement, the chamber dimly lit by the candles they had painstakingly placed. The air was thick with anticipation, and every creak of the manor seemed amplified in the tense silence. Claire arranged the items on the altar with careful precision, her hands shaking slightly with the weight of the task. The grimoire lay open, its ancient text glowing faintly in the candlelight. Margaret stood by, lighting the candles and preparing the ceremonial dagger. The chamber felt charged with a palpable energy, a mixture of fear and hope. As Claire began to chant the incantations from the grimoire, the room grew colder, and the candles flickered erratically. The shadows on the walls seemed to stretch and writhe, reacting to the spirit's growing agitation. Claire could feel the oppressive presence of Samuel Blackwood's spirit, its anger and malevolence pressing down on her. Margaret joined in the chant, their voices rising in a powerful duet that echoed through the chamber. The spirit's reaction was immediate and violent. A low, guttural growl reverberated through the room, and the temperature dropped even further. Claire struggled to maintain her focus as the spirit's dark energy swirled around them. Despite their efforts, the initial phases of the ritual were fraught with difficulty. The spirit fought back with a ferocity that threatened to overwhelm them. Claire and Margaret pushed through their fear, determined to complete the ritual and rid the manor of its dark presence. Chapter 12. Confrontation. The confrontation with Samuel's spirit was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. As the spirit materialized in the chamber, its form was a twisted amalgamation of shadow and rage. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and its presence seemed to distort reality itself. "You dare to challenge me?" Samuel's voice was a haunting echo that filled the room, resonating with a deep, otherworldly power. The sound was almost physical, pressing against Claire and Margaret like a tangible force. Claire's heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Your reign of terror ends tonight, Samuel. We will banish you from this place forever." The spirit's laughter was a chilling sound, a cruel mockery that sent shivers down their spines. "You think you can banish me? I am eternal. I have claimed countless souls. You are but a fleeting moment in my existence." Margaret stepped forward, her voice steady and unwavering. "We invoke the powers of light and protection. By the strength of our will, we command you to leave this place and never return." The air around them grew heavier, and the darkness seemed to pulse with an almost sentient malice. The candles flickered violently, casting erratic shadows that danced with the spirit's rage. Claire felt the icy tendrils of the spirit's influence clawing at her mind, threatening to break her concentration. Despite the terror, Claire and Margaret pressed on. They continued their incantations, their voices rising above the tumultuous noise of the spirit's fury. The chamber seemed to vibrate with the force of their combined will, each chant a defiant stand against the encroaching darkness. Chapter 13. The Battle. The battle against Samuel's spirit reached a fever pitch as Claire and Margaret intensified their efforts. The chamber was engulfed in swirling shadows, and the air crackled with a powerful, almost electric energy. The spirit's form writhed and contorted, its rage a tangible force that threatened to overwhelm them. Claire's grip on the ceremonial dagger tightened as she recited the ritual's incantations. Each word was a struggle against the oppressive energy that filled the room. Margaret, equally determined, continued to chant, her voice unwavering despite the chaos around them. The spirit's resistance was formidable. Its presence seemed to distort the very fabric of reality, making it difficult for Claire and Margaret to maintain their focus. The candles flickered and sputtered, their lights struggling to hold back the encroaching darkness. Despite the intense pressure, Claire felt a surge of strength as she connected with the ritual's ancient power. She channeled this energy into her words, her voice rising with renewed conviction. The protective symbols around the altar began to glow with a fierce, purifying light, creating a barrier between them and the dark force. The battle reached its climax as a blinding flash of light erupted from the altar. The spirit's form convulsed in agony, its screams of rage echoing through the chamber. Claire and Margaret shielded their eyes from the intense brilliance, their hearts pounding with the weight of their final push. Chapter 14. The Climax. The climax of the ritual was both a relief and an ordeal. As the blinding light filled the chamber, Claire felt the intense pressure of the spirit's malevolence begin to wane. The air seemed to pulse with a cleansing energy, pushing back the darkness that had once dominated the manor. Samuel's spirit roared in defiance, but the power of the ritual was overwhelming. The protective symbols around the altar glowed with an intense, purifying light, creating an impenetrable barrier against the spirit's attempts to resist. The walls of the chamber seemed to vibrate with the force of the ritual's power. Claire could feel the spirit's presence being forcibly expelled from the manor. The darkness that had once consumed the room began to dissipate, replaced by a serene calmness. The spirit's screams grew fainter, and the oppressive weight of its influence lifted. As the light began to fade, Claire and Margaret stood amidst the aftermath of their efforts. The chamber was now peaceful, the shadows receding and the air feeling lighter. The spirit had been banished, and the manor was free from its dark grip. Exhausted but triumphant, Claire and Margaret carefully extinguished the candles and gathered their ritual tools. They knew their work was not yet complete. They needed to ensure that the manor remained protected and that no residual traces of the spirit's presence lingered. Chapter 15. The morning after. The morning after the ritual brought a renewed sense of hope to Blackwood Manor. The once oppressive atmosphere had lifted, replaced by a serene calm that permeated every corner of the house. The garden, which had been neglected, now showed signs of new life, and the rooms began to regain their former charm. Claire and Margaret worked together to cleanse the manor of any residual negative energy. They performed additional rituals and placed protective symbols throughout the estate. The sense of peace that enveloped the manor was a testament to their success, and the once dark energy seemed to have been completely eradicated. The community's reaction to the manor's transformation was overwhelmingly positive. Claire organized events and tours, inviting people to experience the beauty and history of the estate. The story of Samuel Blackwood and the banishment ritual became a part of the manor's legacy, adding an air of mystique that intrigued visitors. As the days passed, Claire began to focus on the future. The manor, now free from its haunting, was poised to become a cultural and historical landmark. The renovations continued, and the once dilapidated rooms were restored to their former glory. The manor's potential, once overshadowed by darkness, was now illuminated by the promise of a brighter future. Chapter 16. New Beginnings. With the haunting behind them, Claire turned her attention to the manor's future. The renovations were completed, and Blackwood Manor began to take on a new identity. Claire decided to open the manor to the public as a historical home, sharing its rich history and the tale of its haunting with visitors. The manor's transformation was not just physical, but also emotional. The oppressive atmosphere had given way to a sense of peace and tranquility. Claire felt a deep sense of accomplishment, knowing that they had not only restored the manor, but also freed it from its dark past. The opening of the manor was a grand affair, attended by local dignitaries, historians, and curious visitors. Claire took great pride in showcasing the manor's beauty and sharing the story of its haunting and subsequent exorcism. The visitors were captivated by the tale, and the manor became a popular destination for those seeking a glimpse into its storied past. Claire also began hosting educational events and lectures about the history of the manor and the practices of the occult. These events became a way to educate the public and foster a deeper understanding of the supernatural elements that had once plagued the estate. The manor's new identity as a historical landmark brought with it a sense of fulfillment. Claire had turned a place of fear and darkness into a beacon of history and learning. The once haunted Blackwood Manor had found a new purpose, and Claire was ready to embrace the future with hope and optimism. Chapter 17. The Return. Just as Claire began to enjoy the calm after the storm, unsettling signs began to resurface. It started with subtle occurrences, objects moving inexplicably, cold spots appearing in various rooms, and occasional noises that seemed to echo from nowhere. Claire hoped it was merely residual energy from the previous hauntings, but her intuition told her otherwise. One evening, while working late in the library, Claire heard the familiar sound of tapping. Her heart sank as she recognized the pattern, the same rhythm that had haunted her during the earlier disturbances. The sense of dread that had been dormant now returned with a vengeance. Claire carefully examined the library, searching for any physical explanations for the noises. She found nothing amiss, but the feeling of being watched was unmistakable. The spirit's presence seemed to have returned, more subtle but still insidious. Claire's resolve was tested once again as she grappled with the possibility that their previous victory might not have been as complete as they had hoped. Margaret, now a trusted ally and friend, returned to the manor to help investigate the new disturbances. Together, they examined the manor's protective symbols and performed additional rituals to bolster their defenses. The sense of urgency was palpable as they worked to uncover the source of the new manifestations. Their investigation revealed that Samuel's spirit had not been entirely banished. Rather, it had been weakened and was now attempting to regain its strength. The spirit's return was a reminder that their previous efforts, while successful, were not a permanent solution. The challenge now was to strengthen their defenses and ensure that the spirit could not reassert its influence. Chapter 18. Unearthing the Truth. Claire and Margaret's renewed efforts led them to delve deeper into the history of Blackwood Manor. They discovered old documents and letters that hinted at a deeper, more complex history surrounding Samuel Blackwood and his dark practices. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that Samuel's malevolence was deeply rooted in the manor's past. Their research revealed that Samuel had conducted forbidden rituals in an attempt to gain eternal life, sacrificing countless souls in the process. The spirit they had encountered was not merely a residual haunt, but the manifestation of Samuel's corrupted soul, bound to the manor by his own dark magic. Claire and Margaret realized that their previous ritual had only addressed part of the problem. To fully cleanse the manor, they needed to confront the essence of Samuel's dark practices and eradicate the remnants of his influence. The truth was more disturbing than they had anticipated, and the weight of their responsibility grew heavier. The discovery also revealed that Samuel's dark influence had seeped into the manor's very foundations. The protection they had previously established needed to be reinforced, and the ritual they had performed needed to be revisited with a deeper understanding of the manor's history. Claire and Margaret began preparing for a more comprehensive ritual, one that would address the root of the problem and cleanse the manor of its lingering dark energy. Their renewed efforts were marked by a sense of urgency and determination as they faced the challenge of confronting the true extent of Samuel's malevolence. Chapter 19. The Final Ritual. The final ritual was a daunting and intricate process that required a deep understanding of Samuel Blackwood's dark magic and the manor's history. Claire and Margaret meticulously prepared for the ritual, ensuring that every detail was addressed and that their protective measures were reinforced. The ritual took place in the heart of the manor, where the dark energy was most concentrated. The chamber was set up with the utmost care, the altar adorned with the ceremonial items and protective symbols meticulously arranged. Claire and Margaret worked in unison, their focus unwavering as they began the incantations. As the ritual progressed, the energy in the room became palpable, a mixture of anticipation and dread. The shadows seemed to react with increasing intensity, and the temperature fluctuated wildly. Claire and Margaret chanted the ancient words with a sense of purpose, determined to confront the full extent of Samuel's malevolence. The climax of the ritual was a moment of intense and overwhelming power. A blinding light filled the chamber, pushing back the encroaching darkness and forcing the remnants of Samuel's spirit to the forefront. The air crackled with energy as the spirit's form wreathed and convulsed, its anguished cries echoing through the manor. With a final triumphant push, Claire and Margaret completed the ritual. The light dissipated, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a profound sense of peace. The manor was finally cleansed of its dark influence, and Samuel Blackwood's malevolent presence was eradicated once and for all. Chapter 20. A New Dawn. With the final ritual complete, Blackwood Manor was transformed. The dark energy that had once pervaded the estate was gone, replaced by a serene calm that breathed new life into the manor. Claire and Margaret took a moment to reflect on their journey, their faces illuminated by the soft morning light that filtered through the windows. The manor's transformation was not just physical, but also emotional. Claire felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that they had succeeded in their mission. The once haunted estate had been restored to its former glory, and its dark past had been laid to rest. Claire continued to share the manor's story with visitors, now focusing on the positive aspects of its history and the journey of overcoming its dark chapter. The manor became a symbol of resilience and hope, attracting visitors who were inspired by its transformation. Margaret decided to remain in the area, becoming a close friend and ally to Claire. Together, they continued to explore the mysteries of the occult and share their knowledge with others. Their bond, forged in the fires of their shared ordeal, grew stronger with each passing day. As Claire looked out over the now peaceful grounds of Blackwood Manor, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The manor had been a place of darkness, but it had also become a beacon of light and hope. The journey had been long and arduous, but it had led to a new beginning, a new dawn for both the manor and the people who cherished its legacy. As the story ends, the mystery lingers. If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for more spine-chilling stories and supernatural mysteries. Stay curious, stay brave, and remember, the spirits are always watching. Good night.